Welcome back to the Chapel Grove Church podcast, the Bible centered show that focuses on searching the scriptures to find answers to common spiritual questions. To learn more, go to chapelgrovechurch.com. My name is Trevor Calvert. I'm a member at Chapel Grove Church of Christ, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And now, on to the show. I'd like to start off today's episode by talking about a beloved member of Chapel Grove, Brother Rusty Thompson. Brother Rusty passed away in 2023, but he left behind a special legacy. He was a genuinely happy person, literally filled to the brim with joy. He was without a doubt the happiest person I've ever met, and I'm confident there are many others who knew him that would quickly agree. Rusty greeted everyone who entered the church building with the biggest smile, grinning from ear to ear. He was always positive, upbeat, and was an excellent encourager, and his attitude was infectious. After spending just a few minutes with him, you couldn't help but immediately feel uplifted and energized. On one occasion, several Chapel Grove church members gathered for a bonfire. After just a short while, I saw Rusty pick up his chair and said he was heading home. I chased him down and asked if he had a few minutes to talk. Little did I know that this would be one of the last conversations I would have with him before he passed away just a few weeks later. I started the conversation by saying, "You're one of the happiest people I've ever met. What's your secret?" He then began to lay out the things that he did on a daily basis that contributed to his happiness. He would start the day by praying to God and reading his Bible and his biblical commentaries. He did this in order to fill his mind with righteous thoughts. As a side note, he did admit to me with somewhat of a sheepish grin that he would often eat a slice of cake with his morning coffee. I don't think it was necessarily a secret at Chapel Grove that Rusty loved sweets. But in addition to his morning treat and reading his scriptures and spending time with God, Rusty said he would listen to gospel music throughout the day, and this helped to further fuel his positive spiritual mindset. He also said that he had things throughout the day that he looked forward to, and then very energetically he told me, "I just love life. I love it." Throughout our conversation, it was clear that his zest for life didn't come by default. Rusty detailed a number of setbacks that he experienced in his life. He said he grew up with an alcoholic father who was abusive to the entire family. Rusty said he could remember an instance when his brother, out of fear for their dad, hid outside in the doghouse with snow on the ground. On another occasion, Rusty himself became so afraid after he called the cops on his dad that he hid in a closet for 3 days. Fast forwarding to his adult years, Rusty served in the Vietnam War and witnessed untold horrors there. Like many Vietnam vets, Rusty never spoke much of what he saw and experienced there. He and his wife lost 2 sons shortly after childbirth. His daughter Amy was born at a low birth weight and experienced complications, but she survived and thrived. Rusty called her their miracle child. Later in life, he experienced another setback, the loss of his wife. She passed away a few years before Rusty did, and he missed her dearly. Many might say, after hearing such a list of challenges, that no one would blame Rusty if he chose to be bitter, discouraged, and depressed. However, he chose instead to maintain a mindset of happiness. In fact, he actually took some of those negative events and did what he calls looking on the other side of the coin. Amazingly, he even said that having an abusive alcoholic father was a blessing. Rusty said, "It taught me what not to be." That was another one of his qualities. He said he always looked for the good in the bad. I was deeply moved by Rusty's life story and had another question for him. It was a delicate one, but after hearing his response, I'm glad I asked. I said, "Do you think because of those situations, you grew into someone you otherwise wouldn't have become? That you experienced personal growth that you otherwise wouldn't have?" Without really any hesitation at all, he said, "Yes. These challenges helped me to have a different viewpoint and a deeper appreciation for life and a unique joy." He expressed to me that because of the person he became due to the setbacks in his life, it's helped him to have a positive impact on others, and that's something that he found great joy and fulfillment in. I use Rusty's story as an introduction to the questions that mankind often asks. How can we be truly happy in this life? What are the secrets to true joy? Well, there's 4 main points that I want to focus on. Certainly many others could be mentioned. But the first point I want to highlight is that happiness is a choice. In the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verses 10 through 13, the Apostle Paul thanks the church at Philippi for the gift they've sent him during his travels. But he also takes this opportunity to share with them some of his philosophy of life. Notice Paul's words in chapter 4, starting at verse 10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Paul is telling the Philippians that true contentment isn't based upon circumstances or one's current situation. Happiness shouldn't be based upon having an abundance of resources, nor should unhappiness be the result of a lack thereof. Paul's claim to be content in every situation is remarkable, especially when considering some of the negative experiences he had in his life, many of which he catalogs in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 through 28. There he says, "Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool, I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequently, in deaths often. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst and fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches." Again, to hear someone who's endured such hardships say they can be content in every situation is truly incredible. But I want to highlight a key factor to Paul's contentment. It's perhaps a subtle clue that's easy to read over. In Philippians chapter 4 verse 11, Paul says, "I have learned in whatever state I am to be content." The level of contentment and inner peace that Paul possessed didn't come naturally. He had to learn it, and if you will, earn it. It was a trial by fire for Paul, but he came out on the other side of these challenges with a unique perspective on life and happiness, one that we all can benefit from today. This is also the valuable secret that concentration camp survivor Viktor Frankl discovered. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl calls this secret the last of the human freedoms, which he defines as the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Rusty, through his life experiences, learned this valuable secret as well, that happiness is a choice. Point number 2 I want to notice is that happiness is by design. Research from the National Science Foundation suggests that of the thousands of thoughts we have per day, about 98% of them are the same thoughts we had the day before. More startling, an average person's thoughts are 80% negative. It stands to reason then that we need to disrupt this flow of negative thoughts. Leading up to Paul's expression of thanks in Philippians chapter 4, he gives them some direction on what the Christians should be focusing their minds on. Notice Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you." I don't believe it's by accident or coincidence that these verses precede Paul's secret of contentment in verses 10 through 13. This is reminiscent of Rusty's daily routine. He read his Bible in the morning, spent time in prayer to God, and listened to spiritually centered music throughout the day. He understood the value of proactively setting his mind on spiritual things instead of running the risk of negative thoughts creeping into his mind by default. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." Now, point number 1 still rings true. Happiness and contentment are truly a choice, but we must not lose sight of the small choices we make every day that either help or hinder our progress toward the joyful life we're striving for. By focusing on the right things, we also receive strength from God's word, which can greatly aid us in our daily lives. As Paul says in Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Point number 3 is happiness is found in treasure, but not the kind you may think. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, we find a familiar passage. This is part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he teaches his listeners the importance of storing up spiritual wealth. Starting in verse 19, Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." A simple but profound message. We should not put our focus on building worldly wealth, but rather we should place our heart's desire on things eternal and doing what is pleasing to God. If you haven't already, I encourage you to listen to episode number 9 of the podcast, where Brother Nathan Davis and Brother Chance Dyer discuss the importance of prioritizing spiritual wealth and how to attain it. Point number 4 is that happiness is found in fulfilling our purpose. In a recent episode of the podcast, we analyzed Solomon's discoveries as to the meaning of life, which he highlights in the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon concluded that true, lasting fulfillment can't be found in any earthly pursuit. It can only be found in giving God our utmost respect and following his commandments. Once we understand that God is our creator and that as his creation, it is our purpose to serve him and follow his instructions, we are taking our first steps on the path to true fulfillment and joy. Many people make the mistake of thinking that they have to search for joy. We even often hear the familiar cliche, the pursuit of happiness. But I love this quote from Dennis Waitley. "It is not in the pursuit of happiness that we find fulfillment. It is in the happiness of pursuit." You see, happiness is a byproduct that we attain when we work diligently in fulfilling our life's purpose, to obey God and serve him, and also serve others. A truly fulfilled life centers on the impact we want to make with the few years we have on this earth. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from George Bernard Shaw. It's a lengthy one, but encapsulates these thoughts very well. Mr. Shaw says, "This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations." This is such a powerful quote, and it highlights the fact that true joy comes from fulfilling your purpose. It's been said that there are 2 great days in every person's life: the day you were born and the day you understand why. I'm here to tell you that Christians, those who fear and obey God, they understand why. And they're also the happiest people on earth. I know Brother Rusty would agree. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more, go to chapelgrovechurch.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. It helps others find us and also lets us know how we're doing. Until next time, take care.